and welcome to Awakening Through Love, the podcast. My name's Rod Gordon.
And my name's Martina Hughes.
Take us away, babe.
Awesome. So today we have another question from our Intimacy Oasis community. And the question is how to restart intimacy after a period of time of there being no intimacy in a long-term relationship. Now, this can happen as a result of people having had extended periods of conflict. It could be a result of having small children. I often witness it in women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, that there's a period of not having intimacy and people kind of thinking it's normal to not have intimacy because of one of these factors. But in order to restart intimacy, we need to actually know what's in the way of intimacy, because it is possible to journey through conflict, raising small children, perimenopause, menopause, and have intimacy remain intact. So we're going to excavate a little bit what gets in the way of having maintained the intimacy, because it's in knowing what's in the way that we can know even how to restart intimacy.
Yeah, I think even when you say that, like, what comes up is that belief that that once you get together after 3 months or a year or whatever the honeymoon period is, that sex dies off. And I'm guessing when you're talking about intimacy, are you talking about sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy?
The question was specifically about sexual intimacy, yes.
Yeah, because there's a real difference between intimacy and sex. Like, they're not the same. And using intimacy in exchange for the word sex, I think, blurs things a little bit. But sexual intimacy, that belief that it dies off, I think, is the first port of call in terms of the creating of trouble. Because if you believe that that's what's going to happen or that's how it should be, then it's probably going to how it's going to end up.
Yes.
So, the first red flag I see in that conversation is that belief. Because my experience is that, that beautiful part at the beginning is the starting point, and it can actually build from there. But have to have the skills and the awareness to be able to cultivate that and to create from that point, rather than that be the peak and then it deteriorates from there.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make sense. There's nothing in life where we start something new and we're at the peak. We always have to actually use skill and awareness to build towards making it greater. So to believe it's so counterproductive to everything else in our, or counterintuitive to everything else in our culture. So I think that's one place that's, having that belief, or that somewhere in the background that this is somehow normal, I think gives it a lot of permission.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, in the early stages of a relationship, the sexual connection is often fueled by, all the excitement of getting to know each other, that kind of early rush of hormones. And it's like there's a lot of physical and biological factors that come into play in that early stage. But what you're referring to is that skill that's required to keep and maintain and grow beyond that point.
Yeah, like for me, aside from the physical factors, what's really online is two people's desire. Their desire to be in relationship, their desire to have sex, their desire to connect, and their willingness to do whatever it takes to make that happen. And what I see deteriorate over time is that willingness to show up, and to show up as strongly as we do when we're just creating a relationship. Like, I know for me, I would always be, pardon me, the best version of myself. Now, I did not maintain the best version of myself as I went forward. I was just slowly relaxing back into the habit of who I was, but before that. And that's a big part of that deterioration. So not maintaining that integrity and intensity to being who I want to be, that commitment to
Yes.
wanting to be in a relationship, my willingness to do what it takes to be in that intimacy, to create that relationship, the extra miles I'm willing to go to, if that makes
Mm,
sense. There's always like this extra 10% willing to put in.
mm,
Like what I've found is that cultivating a willingness to do that day in and day out is an incredible addition in terms of creating deep intimacy with somebody. Is
mm.
maintaining that commitment to wanting to show up as if it was, the first day we'd met, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I love that. And it's really from that place that love and devotion can grow in that place of treating the relationship as sacred, is that willingness to show up fresh and as though we're just meeting.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning of a relationship, people do treat it as sacred, whether they
Mm,
intentionally do that or not. But by treating it as sacred, what I mean is they treat it as precious, as something that's valuable and shouldn't be impacted by other things outside,
mm,
like our day to day interactions, or it shouldn't be impacted by being tired after work, or it shouldn't be
mm,
impacted by other things that I have to do. We prioritize it. We
mm,
prioritize that time together, prioritize connecting with that person. We make that person important, and we
mm,
make them in our lives, their role, important.
mm,
And by doing so, we're treating them as sacred.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
And one of the things that comes up for me there is how when when we go deeply into sexual connection, sexual intimacy, it will flush things up in our body. It will start to stir perhaps old hurts, pains, things that haven't been expressed or felt. And so, what can happen there is that as those buttons get pushed in the body, it can cause someone to either withdraw from the closeness of the relationship and the sexual intimacy, or even to withdraw into their head and lose connection with what's being touched in the body as well.
Mm. Cool.
Yeah, it's a sense of going deep in our bodies can be really frightening and vulnerable at times. I know there are moments for me where we've experienced, you know, profound sexual intimacy, and then part of me gets afraid and wants to pull away from that level of vulnerability and closeness.
Absolutely. And I think that's normal for a man or a woman.
Mm,
At any time there's been a deeper experience of vulnerability, of
mm,
showing something or opening towards something, that it's quite overwhelming for the nervous
mm,
system, and it can take a minute to recalibrate.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So learning how to be able to stay with energies and feelings in the body is definitely part of the way to maintain sexual intimacy, but also to reignite sexual intimacy. Because what I notice is that often there's resentments become accumulated in a relationship, and people don't know how to process or move past those resentments, and then those resentments sit in the body and get in the way of sexual intimacy.
Mm. Yeah, I think, like, for me, like, what I've found really hard is, like, how do I put down the weapons? How
Mm,
do I put down the hurt and the pain that I'm feeling from the past to show up to this person fresh,
mm,
and to not bring my hurt and pain forward into this moment,
mm,
because it's not happening in that moment, it's happened in the past. But because I haven't felt the feelings associated with the experiences I've had, what I've realized is that by not feeling them, they're still present in the body, which means they flush up. And then I don't want to feel that. So then I want to push that away or focus on something else to feel different. And quite often that takes me further away from my partner.
mm,
And so what I found is that I would end up building distance and walls, because it
mm,
was like, oh, I feel like this, so I don't want to connect. Like I feel the hurt and pain of those cutting words from the other day or last week or last year or 4 years ago. And it's like, oh, I don't want to open myself up towards you. I don't want to open myself up towards that. It's like I feel too scared. And so I'll make choices and to avoid intimacy. Like I will make
Mm.
choices like, my partner wants to connect. Oh yeah, I've got to go and do this. Oh no, I've got
Mm.
to go and do that. I'm busy. I'm busy. I've got this on. I've got that. There's too much pressure. There's all these behaviors are born from the excuse or the avoidance of that feeling that's actually in my
Mm.
body. So feeling that hurt and pain rise drives me then to make all these choices that I wouldn't actually normally make, and they're not what I would call an authentic choice. They're a
Mm.
choice born of avoiding the interaction with my partner and avoid facing the hurt and feeling in my body.
Mm.
So for me, the pathway out of that to put the weapons down is to actually sit with the heart and the feelings in my body and feel them
Mm.
until they want to move on their own.
Mhm.
And I think it's it's not in my experience, it's not the mind or the brain that it needs to process the emotions. It's
Mhm.
great for creating awareness and understanding what's happening and seeing patterns, but feelings need to be felt.
Mm.
That's what they are. They're a feeling. And the only person that can feel my feelings is me,
Mm.
because they're inside my body, which means it's my responsibility to do something with those, not someone else's.
Mm.
So once, being aware that these are my feelings, they're inside my body, that no one else has put them there.
Mm.
They're there from the experiences I've had and, from beliefs and perceptions and the way that I've seen the world and formulated certain beliefs, I'll have certain reactions to experiences.
Mm.
And so those hurts, those pains from reactions that I've had that I haven't fully felt are still there in my body until I feel them. And so for me, making the time to intentionally sit with the hurt and the pain and discomfort in my body, recognize that it's mine and feel it without blaming someone else or projecting, but feeling that hurt and pain until it wants to move on its own.
Mm.
And in doing that, I allow my nervous system to process the emotion
Mhm.
that sort of vibrates and burns. Like it's so intense and uncomfortable to sit in these deep feelings of
Mm.
hurt and resentment or anger or frustration or, victim. That's one that I'll go to,
Yeah.
is I'll perceive or see myself as a victim.
Mm.
And so in doing that, even just in me claiming that I'm the victim, I immediately make the other person the perpetrator,
Mm.
and they somehow need to be the rescuer as well. I'm
Yes.
torturing that person by playing the victim, but that's sort of like my go-to. But what I do now is when I recognize that desire sort of pop up in my body, I'm like, oh, there's something I need to feel here.
Mm.
Rather than reacting to the impulse or the desire to play the victim, I use it as a red flag to go, oh, there's something I'm not feeling here now.
Mm.
But then once I've found that, when I sit with the feeling long enough, allow my nervous system to process that emotion, when I then face the situation, or even if I just think about it mentally, like in my mind, and I have a totally different bodily experience
Mm.
to that
Mhm.
situation. So it's only then that I can actually turn and open towards my partner, who I've perceived or felt is in some ways their behavior has created this pain in my body, which it hasn't really. It's
Mm.
triggered it. But then I can sort of face them and open towards them. But it's
Mm.
only when I feel my feelings and feel the hurt and pain that's there that I can then turn towards my partner.
Mm. Mhm.
And one of the things I realized at some point was that it's not written anywhere as a law or a rule, like in any of the,
Mhm.
and I'm not particularly religious at all, and I'm not schooled in it, but as far as I'm aware, in all the religions of the world and all the laws in the world, nowhere is it written that being in an intimate relationship, that my partner should behave in ways that make me feel good all the time.
Mm. Mhm.
But there's this expectation in the background for me that, I'm in a relationship, my partner should, I should feel better, I should be happier, this should make my life beautiful. And really what it does is it shows me all the things in my life that I've never faced.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so it's a very different, experience when it's like that. And
Yeah.
so in looking at it from that perspective, it it allows something to shift in my body.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so, and I forgot where I was going with that.
Let me give you a prompt there.
Yeah.
Um, so if there's been resentment in the relationship that's in the way of sexual intimacy,
Mm,
and then somebody takes that opportunity to actually go inside and feel their feelings,
mm.
then what is it that you were describing about that particular pathway of feeling the feelings as part of the process of reopening again?
It's by feeling the feelings, it totally changes my bodily experience of the situation. It's an embodied awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is my body's once I've felt those feelings that are there, my body's liberated of that tension, that
Mm-hmm.
reaction, that desire to react. Like someone does or says something and I feel the desire to react pop
Mm-hmm.
up. If I feel the feelings and the hurt and the pain that are in my body from what I've perceived as experiences, when someone does that thing, I no longer have that same impulse. I just see,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that person's doing, saying, being XYZ. That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
My reaction to it's gone.
Yes.
What that allows, though, for me is to then approach my intimate partner from a place of love and openness and
Mm.
wholeness because I'm no longer avoiding feeling what's in my body. I'm also no longer reacting to it. I'm also no longer craving it to be different.
Mm.
And so those specific things will actually they will melt the tension in any relationship.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And what you've just described is it's it may be a lot for people to process that it's possible to feel those feelings all the way through and free the resentment.
Mm,
And I just want to speak to that because I know the opposite of what you've described is such a, we've described it before as a seductive experience, like getting stuck in the mind story, whether it's like, I'm a victim or something's been done wrong to me or that person shouldn't have said that or that shouldn't have happened. That mind's story that keeps the fight alive, that keeps the conflict alive. I've experienced it create so much separation for me with myself, but also in intimate relationships. So
mm,
if anybody goes, oh, I don't know how to do what Rod is talking about, the first step would even be to interrupt those patterns of what's happening in your mind, because that's the seductive, addictive part that needs to be broken to stop perpetuating what you're telling yourself and drop into what is it I truly feel here? What's beneath the problems and the challenges? Is it hurt? Is it pain? Is it betrayal? Is it vulnerability? Like, so breaking this addictive, seductive pattern of the mind to really feel into the body and to be gentle with what it is that's there in the body, because it does take some time to train and cultivate that capacity to stay with those energies in the body as well.
mm. Yeah. And like no one ever specifically taught me how to feel a feeling. It's
Mm,
just this assumption that it happens naturally, but it wasn't
mm,
particularly natural for me. But if people are looking to feel it, the way that I do it is that I'll just focus on, feeling into my body, notice where the emotion or the feeling is, what it is, and then just allow the sensation to be there. And it's in the allowing of the experience to be as it is, it allows my body, it gives my body permission to feel it. So
mm,
then I can feel like my body open up to the experience that's there.
mm,
And there's something really specific that's happening when we do that. When I allow the sensations in my body to be exactly as they are, not trying to fix them, not trying to make them different, not trying to change them, I'm actually bathing that feeling in unconditional love
mm,
because there's no conditions on that. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
can be exactly as you are. That's what unconditional love looks like. It's like, I don't need you to be any different. I love
Mm-hmm.
you exactly as you are. So by feeling this feeling in my body and allowing it to be there, I'm immediately bathing it in unconditional love, which is the
Mm-hmm.
very thing that a wound needs to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And so allowing the sensations to be there is, for me, the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as a story starts to come online, I'll interrupt that and I'll come back down and focus on allowing the sensation to be there. There is something that happens, and like, I always thought this was a mistake, that I was out of integrity, that I wasn't feeling my feelings properly, is that the feeling would start to become diffuse. So, and by that I mean it's like wide, it's hard to sort of pinpoint anymore. Like, I might start in a particular pace in my body and then spread it out. I'll feel it with my whole body, so my whole nervous system can process it. But the allowing that and allowing the nervous system to burn it, as it becomes more diffuse, I used to think, oh, it's leaving. I need to feel sad. I need to feel hurt. I need to pull it back down. And I'd grab for it and seek, and then couldn't find it and thought I was broken, that I was doing something wrong. But that's actually the emotion, the feeling leaving my body. It's like it's evaporating off. And when I sit with that and keep doing it, all of a sudden it's just is gone. I can't find it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it's felt.
Mm-hmm.
But any feeling that's not fully felt will stay in the body and rise again to be felt.
Yeah.
And so if I feel what's there, it just cleans out my body, it liberates my body. So then there is no longer that desire to react. Because
Mm-hmm.
what I see under all these things is relationship to desire.
Mm-hmm.
Desire for it to be different, desire for my partner to be different, desire for me to open when I feel closed, like desire for to not feel this hurt, desire not to feel this
Mm-hmm.
discomfort. And so that relationship to desire is so important, not just our relationship to our sexual desire, but the more subtle desires. Like, I desire not to feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having equanimity with our desires is really important, in terms of that I feel this and I don't need it to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I feel this and I need it to be different, that brings on a lot of anxiety and tension, desire to control and manipulate. I need everyone around me to be a specific way for me to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've been like that, I've been incredibly controlling, and people experience me then as controlling. Whereas really, I don't feel like I'm in control. I feel out of control because I'm
Mm-hmm.
afraid and I'm terrified and I feel like I'm losing control. So I'm grasping at everything.
Yes.
And so for me, in that feeling, those those feelings, and allowing the intensity and the discomfort and those sensations to be in my body, all those behaviors of me that are unconscious, that are limit love and cause destruction, all them fall away,
Mm-hmm.
because they're all born from me reacting to this feeling in my body and desiring it to be different.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful description. I love that. And I laughed when you were describing that thing of, as the feeling is leaving, having had that, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm not feeling sad anymore. So grasping for it. And I've certainly had that, and it can, yeah, be a bit of a trap to be like, oh, I have to still feel sad. I have to still feel sad, not allowing that to really be with our feelings. There's the discomfort, there's the intensity, and there's knowing that it does pass when we allow it. Mm,
Yeah, and even knowing that it passes, in some ways, like, it can be a problem.
mm,
Like, I can feel the part of me, like, where I want to, like, hang on to the wounds. This is where
mm,
that seductive sort of part is. Like, if it's like, if I, if I forgive, if I let
mm,
go of this thing, then I'm being vulnerable. I'm being
yeah,
open. I'm not in control anymore. It's like, if I hang on to it, I've got an excuse to behave this way. That's what
mm,
I've noticed in myself. And it's like, I always want to have an excuse. It's like having a foot out the back door of a
mm-hmm,
relationship. It's like I always want to have one excuse to behave poorly, or to say or do or something.
yeah,
Does that make sense? And
yeah,
I have to be willing to let go. And that's where it's like letting go of that weapon. I'm letting
mm,
go of that power, that control that I see it as in my body. It's not, but it's, perceive that if I hang on to this wound or this hurt or this resentment or this thing that this person did, I've got something to throw.
Yeah.
Whereas if I let it go, it's like, okay, I've totally let that go. I've got nothing now. I'm
Mm.
exposed. I'm vulnerable. I'm raw. And that is excruciatingly delicious feeling.
Yeah.
And it's as delicious as it is, it's equally terrifying.
Yeah.
And I find I oscillate in those moments between terrified and feeling seductively delicious. And it's like, oh God, I don't know how to be with this.
Yeah. It's also the place from which sexual desire arises in the body, because the level of openness and vulnerability and actually that the other thing I just wanted to highlight from what you said is the element of choice, like that it
Mm,
really is a choice to let go of the resentments and the past,
yeah.
but in making
So hard to make that
oh
choice.
stuff, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but in making that choice then to come into the openness, the vulnerability, the rawness, then sex and sexual desire and sexual energy can be available and free and come about in a loving sort of way.
Yeah. Like for me, like any of these stored emotions, sensations, experiences, whatever that I've left in my body that are unfelt, in lots of ways, like for me, how I experience it is that they hinder the flow of love. They
Mm,
hinder, and the flow of love is including sexual desire
mm,
because our desire, our sexual desire, is what creates life. It is
mm,
life force energy. If there was no sex, there is no life.
mm,
So it's that life force energy as it wants to move through the body. But for me, all those stored emotions or traumas, hurts, pains, and anything I'm willing to hang on to limit the flow. It's like
mm.
the more I store in the body, the less can flow through it.
Yeah.
And so, in that letting go and in that opening, it's so that feeling of revealing and being exposed, it it creates an opening that is so intoxicatingly delicious. But
Mm-hmm.
to take that quality into lovemaking is part of what take lovemaking to a much deeper experience and
Mm,
takes it from sexual to spiritual.
mm.
Because in that moment, I'm willing to face my demons in some ways, to
Yes.
feel the things I'm terrified of, to show this person that I'm willing to do all that, for them, with them, in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
and then to allow myself to make love in that place of openness and vulnerability. It adds so many layers to the physical experience.
Mm.
So when we're starting to add emotional vulnerability and openness to our sexual openness and vulnerability, now we're making love on multiple levels. And
Yeah.
so we're starting to make our love making a spiritual experience and an embodied expression of love, a co creation that we're creating together in the moment, fresh as feelings arise, rather than this mechanical, physical, dense experience that it can be the seeking of pleasure and physical release or sensations. It's when we start to take intimacy and relationship and lovemaking into awakening
Mm.
because we're using the desire for love and sex and connection to awaken past our hurts and pains and wounds.
Mm.
And that's where the evolution of our sexuality and intimacy and relationship moves from a functional desire and from maybe being alone and wanting connection to love making, to becoming loving by releasing our hurts and wounds, and then making love and using that to awaken.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it changes the landscape and the meaning or the intention of an intimate relationship.
Mm.
It's a path through which we can grow and open if we're willing to feel our hurts
Yes.
and our pains rather than react to them
Mm.
and use them as an excuse or a justification for how we behave or what we want or whatever.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that description of how sexual experiences can move from, whoops, there goes my microphone, pull it back. Sexual experiences can move from, yeah, mechanical, habitual, like almost like doing something to each other to achieve whatever the desired outcome is, towards that sense of like emotional, sexual, full bodied openness and vulnerability that does really make it the spiritual experience. And I think so often people crave that spiritual experience without even knowing what it is that they crave, or how to get there.
Mm, yeah. And the hardest part, I think, in teaching that, living that, doing anything with that, is taking our attention off ourselves and placing it on another. Like
Mm,
you touched on it in what you shared just then about two people doing stuff to each other.
mm,
It's usually for their own gratification.
mm,
And I know, like, you know, speaking to women, working with women, it's like for I know it's like a man's masturbating inside of them when it's like
mm,
that. It's a horrendous. It
mm,
just, even the saying it, I just feel so gross in my
mm.
body. But there's that sense of when sex is just that mechanical thing, each person is going to experience some form of a loss,
Yes.
because if something's being taken, then one person gains something, one person loses something.
Mm,
And so it's quite common in intimate relationship for this, for sex to begin to die in this place,
mm,
especially like, if a man is taking sexual gratification, so he's there just to ejaculate, he's there for his pleasure, and it's wham bam, thank you man,
mm-hmm.
then that woman's left, well, you tell me.
Yeah, yeah. It feels very, very empty. Like as
Yeah,
a
like
woman,
being
like,
used.
yeah, being used in those ways. Which, I mean, I don't experience that in our relationship, but I do know from.
That's nice.
I just wanted to be really clear because you're like,
I made
yeah,
the assumption, but
but
good to
just.
know.
uh, um, but yeah, the times when I've experienced that, there's a sense of emptiness, there's a sense of feeling lost, but also a sense of aloneness,
Mm.
which can create more anxiety and neediness and internal conflict.
Yeah, a couple more that I've heard too is used
Mm-hmm.
and discarded.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
feeling used and
Yeah.
just like used for his pleasure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's the reverse
Mm.
of this out there, but it's not particularly fulfilling. Even
Mm.
for, like, I know of men whose partners are highly sexual, there's a sense for them of the same, of just
Yeah.
being used,
Yes.
of being, I know men that
Mm.
feel like they've been even raped by their partner,
Mm.
just used for their pleasure. But
Yes.
in that, there's a loss experienced by that
Mm.
man and that woman. There's something's taken away from them in that moment.
Mm.
And it's in that taking that trust is broken, that
Yes.
vulnerability, it's not safe anymore.
Mm.
It's not safe to be vulnerable. It's not safe to be exposed. I'm under threat by the person that I've chosen to love.
Yes.
And so there's a lot in that. It's
Mm.
a dangerous playground and especially for intimate relationship.
Mm.
But where we can flip the script with that is that I take my attention and place it on your pleasure.
Mm.
Now, if I choose to do that, you know that I'm looking out for you
Mm-hmm.
and I'm only interested in your pleasure. What is it that you want? What is it that you need? How do I bring that? How do I bring a version of that if I can't bring the thing?
Mm.
And what that means is that now my attention's on that. And
Mm.
you can let go of that, frees
Yes.
you up, but then your attention can be on my pleasure.
Mm.
What is it that I love? And that's where we flip the script. And that that is an act of devotion. When we're
Mm.
willing to let go of our own desires or needs to be of service, to love the person that we've chosen to spend our life with, that opens something in the relationship. That sense of like, well, how does it feel to know that I've got your back, that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be there for you with what you need
Mm.
or want?
It feels amazing. Like I feel treasured, I feel cherished, I feel loved, I feel held, I feel safe to open. I feel like there's nothing I need to do. yeah, there's a sense of just melting and surrendering into that. It is like the best thing.
Mm. So, what
Mm.
does it inspire in you?
It inspires love in me. It inspires devotion. It inspires me to want to bring love and pleasure to you.
Mm. Yeah, and that's that's it right there. It's like
Mm,
I know as a man, there's always been this sense of like I want a woman to love me just for being me.
mm,
And I was like, and I had this thought when I was young, like in my 20s. And then I was like, yeah, if I want a woman just to love me for being me, that sense of devotion and worship, that was always present. I was
mm,
like, I want a woman just to love me sexually just because I'm her man.
mm,
And it was that, and then it occurred to me, it's like, oh, shit. I need to be a man worthy of that. You
mm.
don't get love and devotion and worship, sexually and lovingly from a woman if you can't cultivate the qualities to evoke that in them.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh damn, I've got a lot of work to do. I've got a real lot of work to do. And so,
Yeah.
I set about doing that work, but it
Mhm.
changes the dynamic when there's that sense of that my partner's got my back.
Mm.
They're not going anywhere.
Yes.
It's like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Mm.
If you need or want something, I'm here with you to seek that out, to
Yes.
to work out, how do we meet each other in that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
as soon as like that right there changes the whole functional dynamic of an intimacy, because if you have two people in the relationship who are both coming together with the intention of like, well, I need my needs met and I need my needs met and I want this and I want that, everyone's making withdrawals from
Yes.
the intimacy bank, the
Mhm.
relationship bank, and it doesn't take long for the account to get depleted.
Mm. Mhm.
And so this way, what we're talking about here and describing is we're both contributing in. So
Yes.
then what happens is the the intimacy cup runneth over very
Mm.
quickly. It
Mhm.
becomes full. Then if
Yes.
someone wants to make a withdrawal, it's like, yeah, do that.
Yeah.
And so it it's that intention just to have our needs met without the
Mm.
consideration of the other that's a real strong part of the breakdown of modern
Yes.
relationships, because both partners' or attentions are on themselves, and
Mm.
when that happens the relationship itself has no chance because everyone's sucking the energy out of the relationship.
Yeah.
The relationship's the byproduct of the two people's intention to be together
Mhm.
and to give.
Yeah.
And so when we stop giving and we start taking, then it doesn't take long for the relationship to become strained,
Yeah.
drained, and depleted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to touch on a pattern I've seen, which is it's somewhat of a generalization, but I've seen it a lot over time of working with people, is the tendency that when the sexual intimacy has become habitual or mechanical, there's a strong tendency for women to just withdraw.
Mm,
But the flip side of that is the tendency for men to want more sex. So it's like men and women have, and again, this is a generalization, there will be exceptions, but it's like this opposite reaction in men and women to the lack of spirituality in the sexual experience. And what I've noticed in working with men is this part where it's like it's almost like a driven desire, like if we just have more sex, I'll be able to reach that place.
mm,
Whereas because a woman needs to open for sex to happen, she gets tired of the opening, and at a certain point she just closes and goes, I'm not opening again.
mm.
So that can leave people very much at odds in intimate relationship, because the man is experiencing, if we have more sex, that'll be the answer. Whereas the woman's like, I don't even know how to open anymore. And so what we're talking about here of having the willingness to feel through the feelings, to open again, to be vulnerable, it's a big piece of work for people to do, and it's absolutely possible.
Yeah, it is. And like you touched on men's sexual desire, and I think that's a beautiful thing to sort of speak to a little bit because it's not spoken to at all.
Mm.
Well, much. It
Mm.
depends where you hang out. There, so much of a man's sexual desire is born from his desire to give love,
Mm.
to press his love into his chosen woman. And when I say that, like, it's a big deal for a man
Mm.
to be with one woman for the rest of his life. And when a man commits his life to a woman, he commits his life to a woman.
Mm.
It's like, you're the woman I'm going to be with for the rest of my life.
Yes.
And so, in doing that, when sex gets withdrawn, it's like, oh my God, I've made this commitment. I'm only here to love you, or you're the only person I'm going to have, sex with or be with for the rest of my life. I've forsaken every other woman,
Mm-hmm.
every other flavor of sexual energy and woman that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm devoting my life and committing to you. When, if she turns around and takes sex off the table, that man feels trapped,
Mm.
powerless, and also unwanted,
Mm.
discarded, worthless, that his love and his desire isn't wanted.
Mm.
And it's crushing and devastating. And it's such a big commitment for a man to choose a woman to spend his life with. But that part about his love and his desire, how they're connected,
Mm.
and how he wants to press that into the woman that he loves. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really important piece for a man to have um that love received.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It's like there's something about having, being desired as a man, having my love received, having it wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Is something about in that where I feel wanted, I feel loved, I feel desired. It's like it makes relationship worthwhile
Yes.
for a man, because like so much of being a man is being purpose driven. But when that happens, it adds so much richness to every aspect of
Mm.
life. When my love's wanted and desired and received, and I can express that through my body physically, what it does is it feels like the whole world is just like brighter.
Mm.
Every
Mm-hmm.
part of life lifts,
Yes.
and there's a feeling of love that wants to move through the body. There's this desire to, like, my desire to love you, my desire to show up for you increases with
Mm.
my love's being received. I want to, the more it's received, the more I want to do. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? It's like, in some ways, like, to really simplify it, I feel like as a man, I'm like a puppy. It's like, reward me for the good behavior and I'll keep doing it. But it's that simplicity.
Mm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
that being able to give love inspires me to want to love more in other
Mm.
ways. And
Yeah.
so it's like that building in that
Mm.
pool. But I think a large part of a man's desire is that sexual expression.
Mm. Can you tease out a little bit more how it feels for a man when sex is withdrawn? You mentioned that there's nowhere for his love to go.
Mm.
Then what else happens for a man? How does he feel?
Yeah. Well, for me, like, I've had it happen in a few relationships, not in this one, but the feeling is, yeah, discarded, worthless, unwanted.
Mm.
Um, there's a powerlessness that's present in that because you don't have a say in
Mm.
what's happening if it's just withdrawn from the relationship. Um, but then there's something else that happens in that, like, one, that it brings up distrust. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hang on, we made this commitment, we're going to love each other and be committed to only each other, and now that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a feeling of being in a power play and on the receiving end of it. It's like, this woman's got all the power in the relationship. It's like, I can never have sex again,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
unless I end the relationship or have an affair,
Mm-hmm.
which I've said that I won't do.
Mm.
So it's like, I'm being held accountable to being trustable to my word,
Yes.
whilst this person's betraying their word.
Mm.
And there's an anger and a resentment for
Mm.
that uh, I don't know what you call it, that dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that anger and resentment as a man, it's like, oh, well, I want to love my woman, so I'm going to try and make more effort. So then I would make more effort and I'd become
Mm.
more of the nice guy, which he
Mm-hmm.
never gets anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would try harder to please her
Mm.
and make her happy. That would naturally not work.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
So there'd be more anger and resentment. Sex would be further away. So then there's
Yeah.
a hopelessness that
Mm.
starts to come online. But in the whole time I'm doing this, I'm tolerating it all.
Yes.
And where we started with this podcast was that resentment. There's
Mm.
something very specific that creates resentment,
Mhm.
and it's tolerating.
Mhm.
If it's something I resent, I'm tolerating a
Mm.
behavior, a way of being, something I'm doing. I'm tolerating something.
Yes.
And so that resentment that comes online, for me, it poisoned the way I showed up to the relationship
Mm.
because it's always present. I don't
Yes.
want to feel it, so I'm avoiding it. So it's building and staying in my body. And for me, it would want to explode out
Mm.
in anger and rage. And so, but that's not true for all men. It just sits there and festers.
Mm.
And what happens then is it would leak out in my tone of voice, how I
Mm.
would speak, how I would act, the choices that I would make. Oh, I want to do this on the weekend. I do. Yeah, I'm doing this. I've got to wash my hair. It's like, and there's this enjoyment of,
Mm.
hurting, like micro violence,
Mhm.
enjoyment of hurting or disrupting or annoying the other
Mhm.
person because it's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I'm just so angry from tolerating all your, shit. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's festery,
Mhm.
blah. Like
Yeah.
there's no way to, it's just so
Yeah.
festery and gross.
It's like using the weapons full force, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it's poisoning them out in
Yeah.
every aspect. But then,
Mm.
how I would behave or speak at work, my attitude towards women
Mm.
would all be skewed and filtered through that resentment.
Yes.
And there's no part of life that doesn't have that resentment dripping off it.
Mm. Mhm.
And so it it's just a pathway to destroying
Yeah.
intimacy because intimacy literally means close.
Mm.
It's
Mhm.
how close two people feel, and it's specifically the feeling part.
Mm.
How close do we feel together?
Yes.
And those resentments and micro violences, those little accusations that just sort of point out like that, push each other away each
Mm.
time. And so I would end up then desiring to have sex with my partner, but I've treated her like shit. So she's wants nothing to do with me and
Mm.
is now further away than before. So now sex and love and intimacy is even further away.
Mhm.
And I want it to be close, but I'm so bitter and angry and resentful that I'm just poisoning it and just recreating this thing. As soon as we move close, my willingness to behave shit will come up at some point and boom,
Mm.
create distance. And so that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And so the only way out of that for me was like I had to put the weapons down.
Mm.
So I had to let go. It was like I feel resentful. It's like why? It's like because I'm not doing anything about the stuff that's really important to me. I don't
Mm.
have the courage and the integrity to speak up. I don't
Mm.
have the courage and integrity to follow through with what I think's true.
Mm.
I don't have the courage or the integrity to speak out what I really need to speak out, to
Mm.
claim what I want to claim, to feel the hurt in my body, to share that I'm hurting with
Mm.
her, the share that I feel vulnerable or worthless, not wanting to feel that worthlessness.
Mm.
Like, oh, it hurts so much. And yet it's feeling it and showing it and sharing it is the only thing that will actually heal it.
Yes.
And I'm doing the opposite.
Mhm.
I'm avoiding it, tolerating and resenting. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And that is,
that's my experience of that.
yeah, it's such a challenge for men to have space and permission to feel because it's something that is, still not very common in our culture for men to be able to feel. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it, and
mm.
people always say, "Yeah, I give space for men's feelings. I give permission for men's feelings." But most people don't know how to hold space for a man's
Mm.
feelings,
Mhm.
and so the thoughts are there, the words are there,
Mm.
but quite often the actions aren't there.
Yes.
And I see it a lot in group space. As
Mm.
soon as a man says, "Oh, I feel this," about five, women will pop up. Yeah, but I feel this, and how dare you? Because I feel this, and this happened, and it's just like he'll just you can literally see him just shrink and shut down and go, "Yeah, I'm not going to say another thing for
Mm.
the rest of the event."
Yeah.
It's like it's how do we recognize that there's space for everybody's feelings?
Mm.
That because a man has these feelings, whether he's hurt or sad or feels betrayed or whatever in the relationship, doesn't mean that the other person's feelings aren't valid.
Yeah.
That their hurt, their pain, their betrayal, their distrust is not equally as relevant.
Mm.
Just because someone else has a feeling doesn't mean that the other person's bad or done the wrong thing, or that their feelings aren't valid.
Mm.
Both are true.
Yeah, there needs to be space for both sides of the feeling equation. Otherwise, sex is not available because
No.
the body becomes tight, contracted, and then you're back at mechanical sex with a tight and contracted body. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's just like one tiny aspect of a
Mm.
relationship. Like I'm not speaking specifically to that experience for men
Yeah.
around sex, but there's a myriad of versions of that
Mm.
dynamic,
Yeah.
for a woman and for her sexual experience, but her emotional
Yeah.
experience and other domains for men. Like it's true on both sides. But
Yeah.
there's so much for both sides to consider.
Mm.
But it's only through, I think for me, it's recognizing and understanding that how another person feels is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay. And how I feel is perfectly okay.
Mm.
Whether they marry up or they don't, it doesn't matter so much. It's like,
Yeah.
what's the person's experience?
Mm.
And how can I be there for that and see the
Yes.
truth of that and allow it? And at
Mm.
the same time, allow the truth of my own experience.
Mm.
They don't
Mm.
have to marry up. They don't have to be the same.
No. And for me, like bringing my feelings forward in any moment, whether it's feelings about our relationship or feelings from the past, there are times when it does feel uncomfortable, but it's actually the allowing my feelings to be here that is what allows more love to be here. It allows more closeness between us. So I know at different times I've had to like just even, it's like holding my own hand and being like, it's okay. It's uncomfortable. It's excruciating. Feel the feeling, allow it to be seen because that's where the medicine is. So, even now I still have moments of reminding myself that it's okay to allow that feeling to be seen and to walk myself through the discomfort and the excruciating element of being seen.
Yeah. I think like it's valuable to remember that feelings aren't a choice. It's
Mm,
just an experience that a person's having in their body.
mm,
And I think it's a mistake to think, that we've caused it in someone
mm,
else or created it. And like in some situations that can be true. But I mean, in terms of if I feel like, you're feeling hurt or sad,
mm,
and then my perception is, well, I'm a bad person, I've done the wrong thing,
mm.
I'm not going to want to know about your sadness.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, all right, how can I be here for your sadness and your
Mm,
hurt and your pain, knowing that my behaviors, triggered that in some way, and still be available for how you're experiencing life and me and everything in that moment,
mm.
holding that curiosity, and then just allowing myself to feel how that feels and
Yes.
know that this is how it feels to be in this moment.
Mm,
This is how it feels to have said or done this. This is how it feels when another person's hurt by that.
yeah.
It's like, okay, right. But then the beauty of it is now I can change it. I can
Hmm.
adjust it. It doesn't have to be this way anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
But then both people are free to feel however they feel.
Mm,
And both people can actually be curious about how each other and themselves feels and how it's playing out and what's creating it, and then make adjustments.
yeah.
What would actually be of greater service to each other and the life that we're creating? Do we want to keep doing this habit pattern, or do we want to change it? What do we want it to be? How do we want it to look? How do we create that?
Mm,
What do I need to do my part in that?
yeah.
Like there's lots of things that can pop up when we're both curious about the other person's experience. I know for me, it hasn't been easy, but when I see you hurt, when I say or do something, it's it's kind of like when I look at you with curiosity and go, hey, what's happening for you? Like I want to know. Like one, it opens something in my body, even though I'm terrified and fearful that I'm going to get a barrage back or something's going to happen. It's just like, oh my God, I'm so afraid right now. Leaning into that, it's such a gift I think, for the other person
Mm.
to receive. It's like, oh, I've just shared my feelings and it could be an ouch. And this person's curious.
Mm.
It's like, oh, okay, well, I'll do this. But then whatever comes next comes with a lot more compassion, a lot more gentleness, kindness, and love than what it would have if I've had have resisted it.
Yes.
And so then now we're meeting together in love through discomfort, through hurt and
Mm.
challenge and pain. We're finding love. And that's so much the heart of this work.
Yeah, and it definitely feels like medicine in those moments. Like if I've shown a feeling and you go, "Oh, what's going on?"
Yeah.
Then that's medicine. Even just you saying what's going on with curiosity is like, oh,
Yeah.
balm. There's caring, there's loving coming my way, and it also allows me to be more loving with my feelings when you
Yeah.
bring that approach to me.
Yeah. And so just being curious about each other's experience instead of defensive or worried about what we've done,
Mm,
just be curious about what's happening.
yes.
Yeah. And we can adjust or do whatever next time. It's like
Mm,
in that space, there's a lot of freedom to make mistakes.
yeah.
Like if I'm curious about how you feel and I'm willing to make an adjustment, like in my mind, like in old speak, it'd be like I've earned the right to make those mistakes. Does that
Mm,
make sense
mm-hmm,
when I say
mm-hmm.
old speak?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
it's like if I can take responsibility and accountability for who I am, my mistakes, and what I do, in my experience, I've earned the right to make as many mistakes as I want
Yeah.
because I'm willing to do anything to adjust them
Mm-hmm.
and become, the person that's going to be of service or be love or to be whatever the desired outcome is. It's like kind of liberates me. It's that feeling of, well, fuck, I can just go out and do anything as long as I'm, obviously being sensible. Sorry, not just anything. Don't take me literally, but it's that sense of like, I can be whoever I
Mm,
am and totally take responsibility for it and make an adjustment.
yes.
And I think in many ways it's that too that's the root of confidence.
Mm,
Like
mm-hmm,
confidence is a byproduct of action.
mm-hmm,
It's like doing something, failing, making an adjustment.
mm-hmm.
That that like being able to do that
Yes.
gives me confidence to do anything because it
Mm,
doesn't matter. I will screw it up and I will get it right.
mm.
Doesn't matter which one happens first. I'll end up doing both anyway. Guaranteed I will screw it up. But I also know that I'll make an adjustment.
Mm,
So there's a great freedom in that
yeah.
because I'm free of the constraints of my own mind, placing limitations on how I should be, how things should be, how
Mm,
outcomes should be, rather than it's more of a this is how it is. This is would be of greater service, so I'm going to bring this. But there's
mm.
that willingness too of to let go of whatever it is that I want or think's most important for what it actually is most important.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to come back to like our question around, reigniting sexual intimacy, all of this about like the willingness to make mistakes, the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to feel, the curiosity about each other's experience. Like all of what we've covered is part of that.
It's the
And
medicine for that,
and
or the pathway, the actions.
yeah, and one thing that I'd love to share, because I know this often is present for women, is that within sexual intimacy, when we're really open sexually, there'll be times when I cry, or there'll be times when I'm like, scream and rage. And there's space for all of the feelings to be part of sex. And allowing that allows us to go deeper, because if there's any part of me that thinks I have to look good or do sex in a particular way, that creates shutdown in my body. But if I'm allowing, like if Rod can be inside of me and all of a sudden I'm like gushing tears and just bawling and allowing it to come, and all these tears to pour out of me, then there's a much deeper level of connection that happens between us. There's a sense of I'm giving Rod, I'm giving our intimacy every single thing that is moving through my body that's alive within me. There's nothing for me to hold back. Whereas if I attempted to hold those tears back, I would actually cut off in my body and the sex would become shallow. So
Mm.
for
And dry and disconnected for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And literally dry because
Mm.
the vagina responds in the way that we're responding emotionally. Like if we control our body, then the vagina dries up. If there's a sense of opening and letting go in the body, then the vagina is like more lubricated and open. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And I forgot what I was going. I got really distracted by that.
Yeah, so I think that maybe you were going to mention the man's experience of like, how is it for you if I'm crying while I'm sitting on top of you with your penis inside of me?
Yeah, like the first time it happened, I was a bit like, "Oh shit, have I done the wrong thing? Have I, like, what have I done? What have I said? How did I move? What happened? What did I do?" Like, there's that first instant response, and so it felt vulnerable. But then once I realized that it was okay, and that wasn't really my experience at the start, it was like I didn't come into this relationship with that experience. But once I realized that it was okay, it was quite liberating.
Mm,
And because I just know that you're going to roll through a series of emotions, and so when tears come during lovemaking, it's no different to an inhale or an exhale. It's just
mm,
something that happens during lovemaking. So,
yeah.
like sometimes I might slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we move quickly, but it might slow down. Like I'll follow the rhythm of your body.
Yes.
Like if the tears and energies are moving quickly, then I'll stay with that. Stay with the breath. If you slow down, then maybe I'll hold you or something like that. So I'll adjust, but to meet where your body's at
Yeah. Mm.
and just sort of follow it. But it's like a choose your own adventure. It's different every time we make love because I never know what's going to happen. It's that we touched earlier on men's desire for lots of different flavors.
Mm,
Yeah, often in women is the desire to be all the flavors. This is where it
mm,
sort of marries up. And so if we're skillful or masterful in our lovemaking, then we can evoke all those qualities in our woman, all those different flavors, the wildness, the seductress, the timid, quiet, the all the different flavors are in there.
mm,
It's like how do we tease them out? And so like for me with the crying, it's just become like a natural thing that I know happens, but it's also it feels like there's a deeper release in your body. There's a real
mm.
connection between emotional release and lovemaking
Yes.
and healing within that. And the it, we sort of lean towards the sexual healing aspect,
Mm,
which is probably not for this podcast, but
mm.
it is something that's quite possible. And so I think that's the opening or the segue to that, where
Yes.
lovemaking becomes healing because we allow those wounds to become up and to be felt in that moment. And there's a reason why I say healing is because, and like I think it's reflexology, but the reflexology point for the heart in a man is the head of his penis,
Mm,
and the reflexology point for a woman's heart is her cervix. So when we're lovemaking, we're as heart to heart as two people can be. So when those pains and wounds are coming up and we're making love and we're heart to heart, again, they're being bathed in love.
mm,
And so there's something healing and liberating in allowing the emotional experience to be present during lovemaking because it liberates something from the body. It gets bathed in love in a different way to before, but it's the same thing. And so we can use our lovemaking to heal. And
mm.
even I remember it was not long after my accident, and I think I had like stitches across my neck and could hardly move. And we were lovemaking, and you got wildly angry and you were like beating on my chest, like "Rah," and raging. And then all of a sudden, you've just like realized what you're doing, looked at me because I've just come out of spinal surgery, and you've looked down at me, and you're like, oh, "I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, no, more. This is good." Like it's beautiful, like to
Yeah.
feel that the wild ride of all the
Mm,
different flavors of emotions, but then how that impacts sexually.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a ripper. Yeah.
And it's definitely it's part of what keeps sexual desire present and current and alive is allowing like whatever is there. Because if I was contorting to
Mm.
try and be nice or pretty or good or whatever, then pretty soon the sexual desire closes down. And
Yeah.
we've,
If you have to be okay or in the right emotional mood or the right frame of mind or the right whatever to
yeah,
have sex, sex will dry up really quick.
yeah. And throughout our relationship, we've been through some really challenging times, such as your accident and then the way both of our lives changed after that, me going through perimenopause and menopause and all sorts of massive life changing things we've been through. And as far as I know, it's like we probably only ever go a week at the most without having sexual intimacy, because we've being able to make love through every challenge and bring the emotions that allow all of that to be transforming what's going on, but also who we are.
Mm, absolutely.
Mm,
And so for people that are struggling with intimacy in a relationship, that feeling of like, I don't want to have sex, I'm not in
mm,
the mood for sex, that's that's real.
mm,
And it's not a reason to not make love. It's
mm.
just sometimes that's how it feels
Yeah.
to be a human in a relationship and to not actually want to have sex.
Mm,
But I know for me that even just moving towards some kind of sexual touch or intimacy, the desire soon arises.
mm,
And
mhm.
so that's kind of good fun too, actually.
Just aware of the time. It feels like we're getting to the end. There is a whole other piece that we haven't addressed today, which I think we'll save for next week, and that's the dance between resonance and polarity, because that is part of this sexual desire question. But
Mm.
yeah, let's hold that for next week, because yeah, it's a big topic and deserves its own space.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope it serves our community and any other listeners out there. Do you have any last words on the topic?
No, I'm just noticing my complete lack of presence and switching when you talk about being open and your vagina being open. It's like I really can't concentrate on anything. My brain just goes to mush. Just noticing I need to work on that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And thank you for listening.